You hear me all right?
I can.
All right. Mr. Thomas, you have a copy of your hardcover book with you, don't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Could you just turn to page 14 of your book?
Okay.
Yes. Do you see the first full paragraph on page 14 that begins the district attorney?
Yes, sir.
Could you just read the first sentence out loud, please?
Certainly. The district attorney and his top prosecutor, 2 police chiefs, and a large number of cops, although so at odds on some points that they almost came to blows, all agreed on one thing, that probable cause existed to arrest Patsy Ramsey in connection with the death of her daughter.
Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions with respect to that statement. To begin with, if you wouldn't mind, regarding one of the 2 police chiefs, could you turn to page 299 of your book?
Okay.
Yes, the second paragraph on 299 begins, even after DeMuth's recital of our shortcomings. Could you just read those 2 sentences?
Even after DeMuth's recital of our shortcomings, I felt we held a decent hand. Commander Beckner told me later that he felt we had gone far beyond showing probable cause.
Would you read the next sentence?
Certainly. I think she, parentheses, Patsy Ramsey, close parentheses, did it, he said. We should just charge them both with felony murder and aiding and abetting.
Is that an accurate statement of what you heard?
Yes, it is.
Did Mr. Beckner, actually Commander Beckner, tell you that personally?
On more than one occasion.
Could you please explain or elaborate a little further on each occasion how that statement came about?
Well, certainly inside the police department situation room that housed this Ramsey investigation, there were probably a handful of occasions on which, or in which Mark Beckner made statements like that or similar to that, indicating that we had sufficient facts and circumstances rising to a level of probable cause for an arrest of Patsy Ramsey.
Do you know approximately how many times or how many occasions he made that statement?
Wait, let me ask you a question if I could, Dorn, for clarification.
Yes.
Are you asking him for this? I'm sorry, I gotta get my mic on. Is this me? Are you asking him for the statement that Patsy Ramsey was the killer, or for the statement that there was probable cause for an arrest, which is
I'm
what he
asking
just...
for the statement that's actually in the book, which is that there's probable cause for an arrest.
Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman, could you repeat your question to me?
I'm sorry. Can you tell me approximately how many, the number, how many times or how many occasions he made that statement?
As I may have mentioned, a handful that I overheard. There was no disputing that among the detective team. He may have said that outside of my presence, and in fact, I think he did in relation to what we're talking about.
But within your own presence, how many times do you think approximately he said that?
Again, talking about there's probable cause for an arrest.
Probable cause for an arrest. That statement, the gist of that statement, that there was probable cause for an arrest.
Half a dozen times.
Half a dozen times. On any of those occasions, did he explain why he felt there was probable cause for an arrest?
Mr. Hoffman, at that time, I think he was sufficiently familiar with the facts of the investigation to make that conclusion on his own, as did, as you previously mentioned, the other detectives in the case.
All right. Do you know if the report that you actually were able to physically examine, do you know how many subjects or persons were actually being discussed in that report?
Yeah, many, 20, 30, 40 maybe.
Do you know whether or not the report drew any conclusions with respect to the authorship of the ransom note?
Yes.
Could you tell me what you remember the conclusion to be?
As I sit here today without that document in front of me, I recall language in that document that along the lines, and I'm certainly paraphrasing, that there was evidence to suggest that Patsy Ramsey was the author of the ransom note.
Is that the language that you remember evidence to suggest?
Yes.
Now, with respect to your book, you make a statement in your book. I'm trying to find the page, but I'll just ask you generally. Yeah, it's on page 282. Right, that's really all I need to know. Now, I want to ask you about the 911 tape, which became controversial because of alleged background noise and possible voice identifications. Did you ever have occasion to listen to the 911 tape analysis that was done by a lab in Los Angeles or somewhere in California, purportedly to show that Burke's voice was on the back of that tape?
Yes.
He listened to the analysis?
Did you ever have occasion to hear the tape and actually hear what the people were reporting as being Burke's voice in the background?
Not on the aerospace engineering equipment, but on lesser equipment inside the Boulder Police Department, yes.
So it was actually audible on that equipment in the Boulder Police Department?
Now, Mr. Hoffman, let me make sure I understand you. What was audible?
Burke's, or the voice of someone who could have been Burke Ramsey, talking in the background at the very end of Patsy Ramsey's, conversation with 911.
Well, you're cutting right to the punchline. There's a long story behind it, but yes, myself and others listened to that tape and heard this third voice.
So, were you able to identify that third voice? You personally?
Well, I don't have any training in voice identification, but certainly it sounded to me to be a young male voice.